I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference between cheap paint and good paint, why the good paints work better, and also what the differences are. But we're going to talk mainly about water-based paint. This particular product is an alkaline emulsion, which is a water-based paint that basically, in a nutshell, turns to oil when it dries. In fact, you can't get the paint off your skin without using some sort of lacquer thinner and oil or paint thinner once the paint's dried. But we're going to talk mostly about water-based regular wall paints and door paint, and why one is better than the other and what the differences are. Okay, typically your water-based enamel, for instance, the cheaper grades of enamel. So enamel being satin, semi-gloss, something with a sheen on it that seals up the surface. The difference between the cheap one and the good one, usually the biggest difference is the hardness of the shell. So washability is going to be better with a good enamel than the cheap enamel. In fact, you can have a cheap enamel that has a sheen that's very shiny and it doesn't wash off very good at all because it's such a soft, the enamel is so soft it's almost like washing rubber versus washing something that's really hard. So the other thing, so that's your enamel type of thing. The other things that are better about the better paints and the cheaper paints is the flow. So when you're applying the paint, the better paints, when you say you brush it or you roll it, and usually you want to brush it on just once and just kind of leave it. Don't want to go over it too much. Just go over it while it's wet. As soon as it starts to very little bit of a setup, you better get your brush or your roller off of it. Let it do its drying stuff. So, but once it starts to dry, then the better paints will actually flow out better. So you won't see the brush mark in it. You won't see the roller mark in it. So those are all other things that are better about the what they have production is the cheap stuff, and then the good stuff is the premium lines. So the difference between production and premium, there's production, mid grade, and premium. There's usually a bunch of different grades in the middle, and those are basically the differences on the enamel side. On the flat side, it's mostly coverage and elasticity. So when you get a cheap paint, there's no elasticity in it, and on a good paint it has more elasticity. So that especially on the exterior where you're doing wood and stuff like that, that's why they have 100% acrylic. Now they have different grades of acrylics too. So if you get one that says, oh, it's 100% acrylic, so like if you get, for instance, Glidden Speed Coat, it's not going to compare to this product right here, which is Vista's Acabron. And same thing with Down Edwards, whatever it's called now. They keep changing the names of them. I think it's Sparta Shield is a better one. Anyway, so if you get to a premium line paint, so they have one that says it's 100% acrylic, another one says it's 100% acrylic, but the grades of the acrylics and the cheaper stuff are not as good, and also the stuff that they put in it for coverage isn't as good. So, and the stuff they put in it for UV protection is not as good. So, getting a better paint most of the time will pay off. With most applications, especially when you go from production to premium. Sometimes from mid-grade to premium, there may not be that much difference, but it just depends on the manufacturer of the paint. So anyway, some people say, well, paint's paint, it's all the same. No, it's really not. It's totally different when you go from the cheap stuff to the good stuff. One's going to last a lot longer, a few years. And then the best thing is you might say, well, one lasts a few years longer. Well, what's the difference between 3 years, 2 or 3 years, or a year? Well, it's not really the time that it lasts. Okay, it's what is left of it when it's done. So the cheap paint, for instance, if you use a really cheap paint, it'll turn to chalk when it dries. So they use what's it called that makes chalk. Anyway, and the better stuff uses titanium dioxide, so it doesn't make the chalk on the surface, so that when you go to repaint it, the paint that you put on the next coat on is going to stick better and is going to last longer over the stuff that you put on. So getting a cheap material, junk material, doesn't usually pay off. Okay, so stick with the name brand, a high, good name paint. Make sure it's got 100% acrylic if you're using exterior flat, and make sure that if you're using an enamel, that it does have a good hard shell and it flows out nice, because the next time you want to paint it. So then the next thing is so that when you go to put the next coat of paint on, you have a smoother surface. You don't have all those heavy brush marks in it from the cheap garbage paint. All right, talk to you in the next video.